It's a joyous thing today happening here on campus on International Women's Day, that such a gathering has come together. It's a time to connect with those we work with those we haven't seen for a while. Can't wait to see some of you. And to meet new allies, to share our research, our observations, and our stories. We could call this conference For the Love of Play. For we are all deep believers in the power of play. When I came across the quote from Albert Einstein, "Play is the highest form of research," it struck me as a real good political tool. In other words, what is the F word in our field? Funding. It is difficult. It is difficult because we know what it takes to do quality. It is difficult because look at the general salaries in our field. It's difficult because we live in a culture that does not appreciate the incredible struggles that a young family has just living and existing in this world, much less making sure their children get the very best. It costs for our infant toddler program, it costs far more than it does for a year than higher education, than going to this university, and probably many others. So I'd like to turn that F word around and say, hey, we do research. And in fact, a colleague of mine said yesterday, research is the highest form of play. So I do think that today we're going to have a lot of fun with both play and research, and we're knowing that we're on the cutting edge. One of play's most ardent supporters and most articulate advocates was Dr. Patricia Nareau, Professor Emeritus of Education. Many of you knew well. She was the force behind the early education conferences on this campus, and there hasn't been one for 12 or 13 years. So here we are, and Pat is beaming from the other side. It was Pat that introduced me to so many dynamic educators and to the notion of teacher as researcher. One of them was Jane Perry at the Harold E. Jones Child Study Center in Berkeley, which is one of the oldest continuously running centers for the study of children in the country. Jane had an impressive career there for 30 years. She researched, recorded, and protected the rights of children to have play valued as an art, as a science, and as the cornerstone to human potential. She's focused on what we can learn from children in the outdoors and says, outdoor play settings may be the one place where children can independently orchestrate their own negotiations with the physical and social environment and gain the clarity of selfhood necessary to navigate later in life. The clarity of selfhood necessary to navigate later in life. I love that. And I also love this. Humans, by their very nature, are storytelling creatures, conveying essential meanings about themselves and their worlds through gestures, words, and cadenced utterances. Don't you love that? Gestures, words, and cadenced utterances. Whew. She's created an impressive body of work, and we are so lucky to have her here today in this cauldron of love for children. I can't wait to hear what she has to say. Here's Jane.
The first thing I want to do is I want to do a shout out to our interpreter, who is someplace. Thank you very, very, very much for being here. We couldn't do this without you, so I'm really, really happy that you're here. This conference is about the importance of early childhood education. When children have the benefit of quality early childhood education, they do better in school, they live healthy lives, and they're productive and constructive. You are in a unique position, everybody here, and it's just really, really exciting to see how many people are here and that we're all together. You are in a unique position because you understand the life of children because you're living it with them every day. And so to have you here today to think about that means that you are claiming your role in the benefit of early childhood education. And that's really, really exciting. So I'd like to find out a little bit more about you. So if you could raise your hands in any capacity at all, who is working with infants or toddlers? Okay, great, thank you, thank you. And who, in any capacity, can you raise your hands, are working with preschool, transitional kindergarten, or kindergarten? Okay, so if we look around, we can see that body of people too. And who, in any capacity, is working with kids in first or second grade? Great, perfect, great, great. So that means we have people here who are working the whole range of early childhood from 0 to 8 years old. And what's really important about that is when we think of quality education, it's that age range. So the fact that we're all together here is really, really exciting. The other thing I want to find out now, and I'd like people to stand for this, is who has been working with children up through and including 5 years? Great. Can you stand up for that? Thank you so much. I want to give you a real shout out. Woohoo! Because you have chosen to be in this field, and I'm really, really, really excited that you're here today and excited that you've chosen this field. Who has worked in the field more than 5 years up to 15 years? Okay, I want to give you another shout out. Woohoo! Because you have decided to stay in the field. A master teacher told me it took 5 years for her to feel like she had, ground under her feet. You guys decided to stay and stick it out, and I really am really excited that you're here. And who among us have been working in the field for more than 15 years? Wow. Okay. I really want to thank you because you have taken early childhood into your life, and it has become your life. But what's really exciting is that we are all here together, and together we're creating the momentum for better early childhood education. Today, you're going to have the chance to dig deeper into understanding your role in the quality early childhood education. And it is something that you guys are doing together. And I wanted to, again, do a thank you, and I hope this doesn't start feeling like the Oscars. But I did want to thank the organizing committee because I've been to many conferences, and this is a total standout in terms of how to do a conference, and especially how to think about it so that us participants can best benefit from everything that's being offered. So I really want to thank them. I want to thank Carol Simmons for thinking so smartly with me about the keynote and being so gracious about her time and helping me get it up and running. I want to thank Leah Thompson-Clark for inviting me and to help me thinking about it. I want to thank Claudia Gomez from 4Cs who did the translation for me for this, if she's here. She graciously did the last part of her translation when she was in Bogota visiting her family. So I just think that people have been very, very gracious with their time. And I also want to thank Ashley Chavez from the Children's School for doing the tech part of this, which has just been a wonderful, gracious addition. I'm going to talk with you about two things. I'm going to talk with you about a classroom that includes play from the perspective of children and also from the perspective of you, teachers. And I'm also going to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a proud third generation public school teacher. My great aunt Marion taught generations of children in her town. She started as an elementary school teacher, and then she became a principal, and she never married, because were she to have married, she would have had to have quit her job. My mother was a high school English teacher, and I became a preschool teacher and a researcher. When I was in kindergarten, I was given a test, and one of the sections of the test was to pick the things that don't belong. And I got to this item, and it was 4 turtles, 3 going in one direction and 1 going in the other direction. And I became totally offended, totally appalled, because just because one of the turtles was going in the different direction didn't mean it didn't belong. It didn't mean it didn't go. I tell you this because tests were never, ever intended to totally describe the experience of the child. And if you read the small print, which you don't get to see as the teacher when you're giving out the test developers tell you that in the small print. This is fast forward 20 years, and I'm a work-study student at UC Berkeley in the child care program. And I worked with young toddlers, I worked with preschoolers, I worked with after-school care, and I worked with many, many experienced teachers, and I learned a ton. One of the standout things that I learned right away that I never forgot was that children can do things by themselves. Not only can they do things by themselves, but when you set up routines and environment for them to do things by themselves, they love doing things by themselves. Which brings me to some research that looked at children, young children, playing in different countries. And the same 2 things came out no matter what children were being looked at. 1, children really want to feel in control. They really want to have the experience of taking initiative and being accomplished. Look how proud they are. The other thing about children is they desire being in the company of others. So that starts with being in the company of you, and then it gets transferred to also being really vividly attached to their own peers. So how do we think about being with children and helping them be in control and feel that control of themselves and their needs and being in the company of others? I went to the Child Studies Center on the Berkeley campus, and I had some questions. I wanted to know, okay, we know that play is good for kids. We know that play is voluntary. We know that it's active, both physically and imaginatively. It involves exploration and investigation. It's more process than product. It's free of adult control. That's the definition of play. So what are the teachers, how do the teachers do this thing if we're supposed to be supporting something that's directed by the children? The teachers at the Child Studies Center were interested in my curiosity because they felt that they were kind of doing things in the moment intuitively, and they wanted, they would appreciate a little bit more understanding about what they did. So I was offered a work-study job, and it turned out I never left. I was mostly interested in what kids were doing when they were by themselves. I was not interested in the other really important thing about a play-based classroom was the teacher-directed part of it. Because I knew of some research that said that when teachers are in a group, the children kind of relax and they kind of receive the information from the teacher. They know the teacher knows what she's doing. They know the teacher is an adult, an authority figure. So the teacher delivers the information, shows kids, the way things, the activity that and the information she wants. But when the teacher steps away from the activity, really physically steps away, children have to keep the activity going on their own. And when they do that, they show their skills rise to keep that activity going because they have to keep it together themselves and they have to do their own work. And so I was really interested in what they do to keep it together. So I went out into the yard in one of the classrooms at the Child Study Center, and I put cameras on the fence on the periphery of the yard, and I faced the cameras to the couple of the spots where children played. And I strung a guide wire over those spots, and I hung a microphone down over those spots so I could hear their language. I also had the teachers wear a remote microphone, so when they were supervising the kids, I could hear their language. I turned the cameras on when the teachers were restoring the yard in the afternoon and getting it ready for the afternoon. There were 2 teachers. They worked alternate days. I turned the cameras on in the afternoon and I let them run every day for a whole week. I got a lot of recordings of children playing, and I looked at them. I also had the teachers look at some of those interactive play, and I had them tell me what they were thinking about when they set up. I had them tell me what they were thinking about when they were with the children and what they were trying to do. And I learned 3 things. One, children's play progresses predictably. First, kids have to figure out who they're playing with. If they haven't figured that out and agreed on it, the play doesn't happen. The next thing they have to figure out is what they're doing together. If they haven't come to an agreement about what they're doing together, the play doesn't progress. After they figured out who they're playing with and what they're doing, then they play, and that includes all their ideas, that includes their toys, the space around. They have to negotiate that and problem solve that. If they don't have agreement, the play doesn't progress. So that was interesting. I also learned that teachers were doing things to help kids play in self-directed play spots. And the third thing I noticed was that these spaces where they were playing weren't just physical places. They were living, breathing, vital spots that included the kids' imagination, the kids, the teachers, the time of day, the weather, and it was just really kind of in ecology. I'm going to talk more about that, but right now I'd like to give this a more personal feeling. So I'm going to do a guided visualization with you. So if you want to put down anything that you don't want to hold during this part, I'd like you to take a nice, deep, long breath and close your eyes and say, leave this time and this place and go back in time to when you were a young child and you're playing. What are you doing? Where are you? Take another deep breath and notice what's around you. Notice how you're feeling. How are you feeling emotionally? But also, how are you feeling with your body? How's your body feeling? What's your energy like? How does your skin feel? What do you hear? Take another moment to just notice yourself there. And then take another long, deep breath and say goodbye to that time and that place. And come back to this time and to me in this room. And open your eyes. And I'd like to do some research because I'm curious. How many of you were playing inside? Can you raise your hands? Okay, look around because I want people to notice it. Raise your hands again. How many of you are playing inside? Okay, how many of you were playing outside? Okay. How many of you were playing by yourself? Raise your hands and look around because I want you guys to make sense of this with me. And how many were playing with others? Okay. Okay, so we can kind of make sense of that. One thing about research is if you have a question, you never want to assume that you know the answer and only look for what you think you're going to see. So how many of you, for whatever reason, this activity just didn't work for you? You were very polite, you were very patient as we walked through it, but it just didn't work for you. You didn't get a memory. Thank you. I think it's really important when we think about play. It's a natural experience. Play only happens when the setting is provisioned, when the setting is safe and healthy, and when the player feels comfortable. Let's talk about the setting for play. In a play-based environment, it begins by setting up the environment to be a co-teacher. We've all had experience in our own school when we were young, being in classrooms. Not maybe with as much space as this, but classrooms where things happen, little pockets where things happen. And we might have called it the book corner, or the playhouse, or the dress-up area. We might have had a block table. Here is a writing table, and it has 4 chairs at it to say, this is a spot for 4. This table right here has 4 chairs, but it also has a tray at each spot to give it a protected feeling for the child because each tray has its own Play-Doh, its own rolling pin, and its own little plastic knife. And the child at that spot can really relax knowing that they have their own stuff. Here's a spot for 1. It's defined by 1 chair and materials for 1. And it looks over a spot that's defined by a rug, and in this case, a multi-purpose riser. And it has the same 4 activities. This is a knock block so that there's a bowl of pegs and a hammer next to each knock block, and the kids bang the pegs into the top and the pegs shoot out the hole there. But it says, without the teacher saying anything, this is a spot for 4. In the very beginning, you're going to have to teach kids how to read that spot, but they're going to know that this is a spot for 4. Here's a spot for 1 or 2, depending on how many chairs you put there, and it's intentionally up against a wall to be more focused and meditative. Here's a teacher-directed activity, and next to it is a table for kids who might be waiting. There's felt that's been cut to fit the table, and on it is some toys, and there's chairs for 3, and it says this is a spot for 3, and you're going to play with this. Next to it is a get inside sandbox, and one of the covers has been left on it to divide the space into two smaller areas so kids could come on either side and play in a small group, and the same materials on either side so that they can begin playing. This is a big butcher block paper, just been taped to the wall. Chalk has been put next to it, and kids can come and use their whole body to draw and write and imagine together, and the teacher doesn't need to be there. What I'm describing, that living, breathing space that I said that I found, is ecologies, and ecology includes the suggestive features of available materials, space, and the familiarity of playmates. Here's a child, he's sitting at the tray, and each of the trays has one square of paper and a little bowl of glue, and there's a shared basket of just strips of white paper. And the activity is explore two-dimensional space. Really, really important when you're thinking about literacy and making sense of left and right and up and down. Look at all the different ways kids explored that two-dimensional space. Some even added additional materials. Next door to that space is another space which, coincidentally, these children are using the same kind of material to explore three-dimensional space. Ecologies also involve what children naturally enjoy doing and the kind of play that usually occurs, like domestic, superhero, fast, slow-paced, solitary, group. Here is a group area, and it's a sandbox that you stand up to, and it has a lip on it for a work surface. And it also, one of the covers has been intentionally left on it so kids could come to either side and have a smaller space to come and feel like they could start their game. There is a table with 4 chairs that defines a small group, and they're looking at each other. There's also loose parts, materials like cups and plates and bowls, and they're categorized to be, and also inviting. There's plastic over here and metal over here. Not that kids need to be anally organized, but that when you organize and categorize, it increases the complexity of the area and helps kids think on a higher level. There's also sand and water, so it increases the complexity of the area, adds another curricular element. It also replicates the dress-up area inside by offering it outside as well. Here's a table, and it's pretty self-explicit what's supposed to happen here by how it's set up. It's a spot for 2, and the spots are intentionally facing each other to help kids interact. And the teacher's even going to call it the office when she refers to it. There's squares of recycled paper, and how many pencils? 2 only, because it's a spot for 2. Sand is a really essential part of early childhood. Take your milk crate with all your toys and dump them in the sand, and kids can have a really great interactive time. What I like to do is I spray the sand so it sort of sticks together, and I make a pile of sand right here, and I put 2 shovels and 2 trucks. Then I make another pile over here and put 2 shovels and 2 trucks. Now there's more toys here for them if they want it, but this is an invitation for them to start, and they can figure out how they want to proceed. And they may be just really happy, just the 2 of them right here. Another group might be really happy, just the 2 of them right there. Because I've put a cover to a sand table there, if they were ready to add to the complexity of their play, they could communicate with each other and go over across the bridge and add even more dynamic to what they were experiencing. Ecologies also involve what children remember from playing there in the past. So it's not just the materials that are offered, but what they remember. They bring that to that space and they remember it. So when we're talking about play that's innovative and goes beyond what you might have intended for an area, think about, oh, am I ready for them to remember that they did this here? Or maybe they could do that in another area that might feel more appropriate. We teach kids how to use tools so that they can follow their own momentum, their own initiative, and accomplish what they want in their own manner. When I see these two girls playing with such vivid interaction, I will definitely set up this equipment tomorrow so they can come back and do it again and really build on that and make a real solid foundation of that experience. To repeat, activity areas are living, breathing, vivid ecologies where teachers create spaces of wonder and investigation, not only for the children, but for you too. These two kids are deep and master players at their game, and they're having a lot of fun. Behind them is a third piece of equipment where another child is exploring it at the pace that that child is ready for. And behind is an onlooker child who gets the opportunity to see what's ahead as that child gets more experience. What I'm describing is a way of thinking about your classroom that follows a process of inquiry. And it's a way of helping you notice that whether you think about it or not, you are following an experience of doing research. And this is in your handouts. But it starts with setup. And you set up your area, and then you observe and you watch how children are using that area. And you verify, are they using it in the way that you thought? And you begin to interpret a little bit about how they're using it, what you see, and think. Do I need to step in? Is this working? Do they need any help? If you decide to step in, you step in, offer your support, and then step out again, because this is a self-directed activity. This is children taking the momentum on their own. And you observe again, and you make your evaluations. You're going to need to assess the children and notice what they're doing, and we have to do a lot of reporting, not only about the developmental progress of kids, but about your curriculum. This is a definition of research where you observe something, collect information, make sense of it, and report on it. That is a definition of research, and that's something that you're already doing. So we're all researchers here. To review, setting up the environment to be a co-teacher involves clearly marked and protected small learning centers, or ecologies, open-ended materials, child access to those materials and tools, space to move and interact freely, balance of curricular areas across cognitive, social, emotional, physical, and language, those developmental domains, balance between what you offer inside and outside. Hopefully you can offer the same in both. Balance between the familiarity and repetition of play that builds that solid foundation and the enrichment that's novel, but not so much novelty that the kid's paying attention to the novelty instead of their own momentum. A balance between child-initiated and teacher-directed activities, and a balance across all the different areas of curriculum that you want to expose the children to. Leah mentioned the Child Study Center. That was where my classroom was. The Child Study Center is what its name is. It's a center. and it studies children. It started in 1927, almost 90 years ago. And then we didn't know that children grew in a progressive growth chart like you do if you go to the pediatrician and they put your dot on the growth chart line. We didn't have that. We didn't know that children developed in stages. We didn't know that play had stages to it. So how did the teachers and researchers come to know this? They gave the children some special toys that the kids could play with that would tell them what they knew when. They also observed. And the way they observed was to look at just what the child was doing and what they heard. Just what the child was doing and what they heard. And they wrote it down. And I'm going to go behind the screen and get a piece of paper that I forgot. I want to read you an observation. Absorbed in her work, Sharon was carrying sand from one part of the sand pile to the other. "Now, don't you let no one take it," she said to Bobby, concerning her mud cake. With that, she turns her spoon to making a new cake. "This will be my little baby cake." "Oh, will you get a nice little baby for me, Bobby?" Bobby says yes, and went over to the other side of the garage to find a doll. He returned with a very nice dolly, but her head was coming off and her dress was badly twisted. Sharon takes her and turns to the teacher nearby. "Will you fix her for me?" But the teacher doesn't hear her, so Sharon tries to fix it herself and succeeds to her measure of satisfaction. Turning to Mary, she says, "I'm going out on the train. You watch my baby." I'd be curious, does that sound like something you might see in your classroom or a classroom next door to you? This observation was written in 1937. 1930, almost 80 years ago. So occasionally when people say, "Oh, has children's play changed, the times, the technology?" I say, no, not if they are in an environment that lets them play on their own. What you heard from this observation was just what the observer saw. So, Andrew is fingering the sand, looking closely, rather than Andrew isn't playing with anybody. There's an article that I wrote that's in your packet that talks a little bit more about it. I'll just say one thing about this observation. The way it's written, whoever did the observation notices that Sharon fixes the doll and succeeds to her measure of satisfaction. Whoever wrote this saw something on Sharon's face or something in Sharon's body that made her believe that Sharon felt satisfied. I would have preferred that she told me what she saw on Sharon's face and what she saw on Sharon's body so that I could make sense of that information and not have the observer do that interpretation, because I've lost that piece of information without her telling me. I completed my research and I graduated. I got a job as a teacher, as one of the staff teachers at the Child Study Center. And I wrote up my research because, I was going to be helpful to the field. I wrote it up as a book, and it got rejected twice. I started a family. Both my pregnancies were part of the curriculum for that year. I took a headache class because working in early childhood is really hard, and you have to take care of yourself if you want to be a good teacher. Somewhere in that 10 years after I started working as a staff teacher, I remembered, hey, I have a book in my computer. So I took another look at it, and I got it published. And that was 13 years after I had done the research. And times had really changed. It wasn't just that we were interested in how a play curriculum works. It was that we were losing play opportunities in this really rigorous testing climate. So I want to play you an interview that I did on the playground, just as a tip in terms of advocacy. It's great to do interviews on the playground because you don't have to remember what you want to say because it's all out there and you can just talk about it. I like to include it because it includes the voices of children and it's not just my voice talking. And we might have to really be attentive to hear it in this room.
A couple of 4-year-old boys dump buckets of sand on a flood-ravaged city. All the while, a hose keeps pumping out more water. Other children join in and help to build the sandy barricades, yelling with delight every time their effort dissolves into wet piles. Then in an instant, the scene is transformed into a volcano.
See? Oh, it is a breakaway. Oh, look out! The hot lava flood. Yeah, now we did it.
Sometimes teacher Jane Perry likes to take an active role in the play, but not too active. She says when the children are outside, that's their time to figure out the way things work. Here on the playground, the swings, the sandbox, there are no boundaries. It's all creativity and imagination.
And all that inventiveness comes out of their own initiative, and I think it's the power of satisfying their own curiosity that's one of the most important pieces of how children learn.
What are they learning here that they could not learn in a classroom?
Well, they're using water and dirt. They're using water and dirt. You can't do that inside. You have to do that outside. They're using natural materials in a large space that allows them to really explore without restrictions of noise and movement.
Perry says they learn how to make sense out of a very complicated world. Everything from physics, what happens when the water breaks through the sand, to basic social skills like getting along with each other. That's why Perry says she's concerned with the trend in schools, even preschools, to focus on academic drills and testing.
I don't want people to forget how rich the outdoor environment is for children, and I'm concerned that with performance standards, that the process of learning is going to get confused with the product of learning, the performance objectives.
Perry says that learning process includes important social interactions, which are more muted when children are indoors.
I know that when teachers see our kids in the classroom, it's very evident that they are well practiced in negotiating, communicating, and cooperating. And that just makes sense.
And then, as if on cue, Perry is interrupted and gets to put those negotiating skills into practice.
To Carlin.
You know why?
Hannah said I was a dumb pet.
Are you? So that's a really good example. I mean, there are 3 kids, and 2 are playing a game, and one comes in and doesn't really get the game, and she's told, you don't know how to play it, so she lashes back and says, you're a dumbhead. But what's really going on is that they haven't stopped and said, well, do you want to learn? This is the game we're playing, and they just have to slow things down.
I think all of us could use a dose of your playground.
Yeah. Well, you know, it is breaking down interactions into slow stepping stones to make it understandable.
What Perry does on the playground may seem simple enough, but it takes a lot of training. The problem is childcare doesn't pay enough to make it worthwhile to get that training. That's another reason Perry wrote her book.
My hope is that if people just remember why kids need to play, then the rest will be a lot easier. There'll be a conviction to really make playful environments happen.
Hey, Bill! Bill is here, yes!
Now we're 13 years after that book is published, and people are beginning to talk about the benefits of early childhood education. And President Obama talks about it as State of the Union address to the country. And governors are trying to find money for universal preschool for 4-year-olds. The devil is going to be in the details. You who are working with kids every day are going to have to ensure that that funding and that momentum embraces play. Why? Because that's the healthy way that children live, is in a world of play. And it's you together, this room, in this region, I have to say, this region is a really standout region of momentum for early education, where other regions are seeing early childhood get cut. You are creating a momentum. You've got degree programs here that are not in other regions, and the reason you do is because you've got enrollment coming. You've got a quality and participation in this region that's really making early childhood happen. And so your voice is going to be really important. And another thing is, you know what the classroom is about because you're there. People who have ideas about what the classroom should be, they're not in the classroom. You have that knowledge. And when you stand up and talk about that knowledge, it becomes well evident that you know what you're talking about because you're there every day doing it. And I really can't tell you how important it is because it will be evident to those who aren't in the classroom that they may not get it like you do, and if you're seeing something that needs to happen in order to ensure play, it's going to be part of your voice that makes that happen. How do you do that? This is also in your handout, but you talk about a play-based program and set up your educational goals for the classroom using this language and using language like this to talk about education through play and use that language and talk about it that way. Talk about the times when kids are playing in those ecologies, in those areas. That's part of your curriculum, not just the teacher-directed stuff. When I was doing lesson plans, I would do it after my shift was over because I needed to document that curriculum that was happening when kids were playing on that day. So that becomes part of your curriculum that you document. And what you do when you are facilitating that play becomes part of what you describe in terms of what your curriculum and what your strategies are. And it's a feedback loop that helps you think about the momentum of your classroom with that really vital play going on. So here's a second grade classroom, and they've been taught about timelines. So what could you think about when you think about what a line might do? So how you're going to document how kids make sense of what you've presented to them is how they're using that information themselves. The more you look at how your classroom is set up and what areas of curriculum are in each spot in your classroom, not only inside but also outside. And this is a picture that's in the article that's in your handout so you can look at it again. But every single area in the inside and outside, you can map out what curricular areas will happen in each of those spots, and there will probably be many in each spot. So what curricular areas happen, what types of play happen, so that when you are with the children, you've got that in mind, that you will see certain things in different areas, and you can begin to use some of your floor time to do all the recording and documentation that you need to do. You will be thinking about three things when you are supporting children while they play. First question that you'll ask yourself is, does the child play alone, with peers, independent of the teacher? That's what child-directed play is. So you want to ask, does the child do that? If yes, use the safe, hazard-free, not risk-free, but hazard-free play areas to independently support play. If the child can't play alone or with peers independent of the teacher, encourage them with having them play side by side with others in the play spaces. Enrich the area with explicitly themed props. Use a play voice and language to model play before stepping back to observe. Here's a play spot. A parent built a box. The drum gets dropped in. The two mallets are there. There's enough space for the kids to walk around. Here's a play spot. There's a bread basket with strips of construction paper, another basket with scissors, and a rectangular block with swatches of tape. You can watch several curricular areas, several areas of development, just by seeing how the child makes sense of that. Here's a spot. You've coached the kids in delicate, tender, soft, interactive ways of being. You might call it a soft spot, and there they are side by side. When I did my research, I put the camera on the fence behind the swing, and I thought, okay, I'm going to see a lot of physical, gross motor stuff. I also saw a lot of social stuff, because the kids put their feet in the middle and they were facing each other. And all of a sudden, because kids don't necessarily always know to look at you when talking, they got this heavy dose of real impact. So if I had a kid who was saying, no one's playing with me, or somebody is clinging onto my leg, I'd find another child, put them on the swing. They're going round and round. They're looking at each other. They get off the swing. Whoa, we're friends, right? The next thing to ask yourself is the play losing focus? Are players interrupting others at play or becoming unsafe? If not, continue to support through the play areas. You don't need to step in. They're doing it already. They're in the areas. You can trust that their interaction is working at the level that they're meeting and satisfying themselves. So you can do some of your documentation right there while you're watching. You can also refresh the areas as the theme or the play group changes, and you can include the kids in that and help tidy the area for the next kids to have a turn. What about if the play is losing focus or interrupting others? Remember I said that I noticed that children's play progressed in a certain predictable manner? Ask yourself, do the playmates know who they're playing with? Do they know what game they're playing? What do they think they do in the game? Do they have a place to play their game? Maybe the play is becoming unsafe. Listen and use language from the children as they're playing to model and support verbal expression. I saw this at the children's school when I was observing. The teacher just took the commentary that was coming out of the kids' mouths as they were playing and used it to help them think about safety. With the children, review child-generated physical and emotional safety rules for the game. Then think about, why am I stepping in? What's the purpose of me intervening? Maybe you need more information from the players to refocus the pretend theme. Use open-ended questions to players in their pretend role to solicit or verify information. What you do is you just step right into their pretend game, and it is real, and they are, you refer to them in their pretend role, and you refer to the space as to what they're pretending it to be, and you talk with them in that pretend fantasy. And you follow up with enrichment if needed, maybe referring to the play theme, definitely referring to the play theme and players as real. Maybe you need to reinforce or elaborate on information to strengthen the pretend elements. You use play vocalizations. You heard some of that in the radio interview that I did. Theme-related language heard from the players. Suggestions of additional materials, props, referring to the play theme as real again. So just getting kids to tell you things with open-ended questions can really settle play. Here's 2 tofu containers, one with recycled paper squares in one, and one with oil crayons in another. That settled the play just by putting that there, and gave him the experience of where to write and where not to write. If you need to enforce safety, the play is maybe too large. The play group is maybe too large to have them successfully listen and communicate, so you might need to divide it up into smaller, more successful groups. Clarify nonverbal language, explain and coach an appropriate rough and tumble play, offer flexible problem-solving options, helping them to think. Sometimes I wouldn't offer those options. I'd just say, well, how would this work? You're saying this and you're saying this, how would it work? And take their suggestions. Maybe your setup is way too elaborate, and it's drawing so many kids that they can't keep it together on their own, and you have to stand next to them, and it's becoming a safety issue, and you're not noticing what's happening behind you. So you might have to make your setup a little bit less exciting. The other part of our role is to think about the child and how we understand that child in this environment. So we're going to be looking at their productions. We're going to be looking at observations that we do and what other staff do, because kids are there the whole day and other staff might see things that we haven't seen on our shift. So you want to look at their observations and things that they do. This is the timeline activity classroom. And this child has taken that idea and imposed it on another activity about size and used it to sort of mark how big the elephant is. You're also going to ask yourself, where in the classroom, both inside and out, do we see the child? What areas is the child using and how are they using it? And what areas is the child not using? What areas do you not see the child going to? Because you might feel really gratified that you've put all your curriculum into all these different areas, but you need to ensure that the children are all frequenting those areas to experience that curriculum. And just like anybody else, kids feel more or less comfortable with different types of activities, and they might need encouragement to use some of those areas. So ask yourself those 2 questions to get to know the child. And then ask yourself, what strengths do we see in the child? What is the child feeling accomplished about? And then once you've asked those 3 questions, ask yourself, what's important to that child? I've been to many, many staff meetings where we've had problematic behavior and we've gone round and around trying to figure it out. When we flip that frustrated around and around conversation to getting to know the child through their productions and observations, finding out what areas of the classroom they use, what are their strengths, and what's really important to them, then we've stepped into their skin and we really appreciate better who they are. And that problematic stuff makes a little bit more sense. We can see what our next step is to helping them. Today, you have a really great opportunity to experience your thirsty curiosity to make a difference, not only for kids, but for yourself. You will have to fight for play-based programs. That's part of being a teacher. You're going to have to fight for it. It's going to be easier and feel more successful, and you will be more successful if you do it in the company of others, in the company of the people you work with, and in the company of this group, because you have a region that's really doing it. And you can use each other, which is what today is all about, is getting a feeling of being together. I really think that you're going to find some gold today, and I'm really excited for you to find that gold and help it take you deeper into your understanding of who you are and how you promote quality education, and taking your appreciation of yourself to another level. I'm really excited that I came here today. I'm really thankful for spending the time with you, and I hope you have a super, super, super day today. Thank you.